What's up, everybody? My name's Nate Greene, and welcome to Game Therapy, where I review games that have been overlooked or just plain shat on, and tell you to go play them, because, you know, usually they're pretty worth it. I wouldn't be reviewing them if they weren't worth it. But today I'm going to be reviewing Nier. There's an action RPG released in 2010 for the Xbox 360 and PS3. It also has just a great hook. Before you even start a new game, this is the very first thing you hear.
Ice, you dumbass! Start making sense, you rotten book, or you're gonna be sorry. Maybe I'll rip your pages out one by one, or maybe I'll put you in the goddamn furnace. How can someone with such a big smart brain get hypnotized like a little bitch, huh? Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord. Come over here and give Vice a big sloppy kiss, Shadow Lord. Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us!
Alright, so for me at least, the intro completely sold me on the game. Having some chick that I don't know scream at some dude that I don't know is a book yet to pull his fucking head out of his ass was just the greatest hook. And I wanted to play it even more. And sometimes I listen to it and I want to play the game all over again. And then I do. But Nier is a just fantastic game, and it was overlooked. Mainly because it didn't have a budget. It sure as hell didn't have a budget for marketing. And it came out at the same time as Red Dead Redemption. So no one, really gave a shit. And that's fine. Because that's... If all games got attention, then what would I be doing right now? Probably be reviewing that. Alright, so I'm saying that Nier is great. And you're saying, what the hell is Nier? I don't blame you, because there are reasons that no one really gave a shit about the game. Mainly the gameplay, which sucks. It's not good. It's basic. No, it's just not good. It's a hack and slash, and it revolves around basically 3 different types of weapons: small swords, spears, and these huge fucking cloud swords, like that Cloud from Final Fantasy VII has. But those are worthless, and small swords suck. And that's the shitty part, because that means all you've got left is spears, which you can't even use until the second half of the game, because Nier forces you to use small swords for the first half of the game, which is like a solid 10-ish hours, like 8 to 10 hours, depending on if you know what to do or not. But then after you get spears, and everything's fine, because then you can just, kick everything's ass. Alright, so then we've got the graphics, which firmly fall into the realm of media. It's, again, like all things in this game, with a few exceptions that I will touch on later, not great. I mean, the environments are pretty plain, textures are copied and pasted all over the place, NPCs have nothing to do, they just stand there like statues. This isn't like a graphical complaint, but it's just kind of a fun aside. Whenever you go underneath like a bridge or like any kind of structure and walk outside, the sun just goes fucking supernova for some reason. Like, it's really strange and kind of jarring, but it's a quirk. But the main problem of the game is that it only really has 7 areas. And you visit these 7 areas, plus the overworld, which doesn't count because it's the overworld. You visit the 7 areas at least 2 times each while playing the game, which sucks, because they don't really change. They don't. Alright, and then there's the problem of the enemies. I mean the plain enemies, not the bosses. The bosses are great. Just the plain, everyday enemies that you fight. There's really only like 5 different types. 10-ish if you count the armored variants from the second half of the game. And during these encounters that you will fight, often, your companions are just plain useless. They have no AI at all. They just kind of stand there and clutch their weapons dumbfounded as you hack and slash through everything. occasionally, like, one of them will take a pot shot and it won't really do anything, and you just kind of laugh at them. It's kind of like Elder Scrolls and Fallout, like Bethesda type RPG companions where they just don't help and mostly get in the way. Even during overworld things, just running across the overworld, expect Kaine to teleport to your location every like 15-20 seconds. Thankfully, they kind of got around the problem with your other companion, Emil, by just having him float around. So while you're climbing a ladder and you see Kaine teleport up to the top of the ladder, Emil at least will just kind of float. Which I'm not hating on because it works, and I actually kind of thought it was a nice touch. Alright, and so now you must be thinking, wow, Nate's hating on Nier pretty fucking hard. And it's because I am, because everything I've said so far is a valid complaint about the game. And I really only have one more thing to touch on before I get to the reasons you should play Nier. And the last bit is the fishing minigame. The fucking fishing minigame. This is the worst thing that's ever been forced upon me in a video game before. Back when I played the game in 2010, I rage quit for a solid 2 weeks because the fishing minigame kicked my ass so thoroughly. And after I came back to it, I realized it was because I was paying attention to the old fucking man who told me, hey, you can catch the shaman fish on a beach. And I was like, well, hey, there's a beach right next to you. So I guess I'm going to go fish there, because why am I going to run and find a different beach anywhere when there's one right next to you? Turns out, if you don't pay attention to the minimap and go specifically where the fucking minimap tells you to go, you're not going to be able to catch that fucking shaman fish. So just be mindful when you play the game to follow the minimap when it wants you to fish. And then never fish again. Alright, now with all that negative shit out of the way, I can actually start on the reasons why you should play Nier, because it's one of my favorite games. I love it. But I should start by saying that Nier is not a happy game at all. It's pretty fucked up at times, most times. And it's pretty upfront about it.
Our world is dying. Once thriving populations now lie decimated by plague and disease. The end has never felt so close. And if that wasn't enough, monsters called shades now roam the land, threatening our very lives. But that's of no consequence to me. My daughter is sick, and my only concern is to give her a better life. I try my best, but I'm only one man, and a hard one at that. So the kindness of the villagers has meant much. Nothing will stop me. I will fight for Yona until the end. Until the very end.
And after hearing that nice spiel by Nier, you're thinking, oh hey, I'm gonna save the world. But holy shit, you're wrong, because that's not what the game is about. Because you play as I said before, Nier. He's this super masculine, like, ugly as sin dude, father of Yona, who is the point of the entire game. And all he wants to do is save his daughter, she's contracted the supernatural black scrawl, quote-unquote, virus, or disease, or whatever the fuck it is, because they never actually explain what the hell it is. But all they tell us is that it doesn't have a cure. Along the way, you fight the bad guys, the Shades, who are like these twisted-looking, I mean literally twisted-looking, black and yellow monsters. Kind of humanoid, but they just bleed a shit ton when you kill them. And as I mentioned before, you get some party members along the way in Nier's quest to save his daughter. There's Vice, who's this English, uptight, floating book dude, who's also the source of all Nier's magic. Kaine, who is this tragic, hermaphroditic stripper heroine, Or at least she dresses like a hermaphroditic stripper heroine. Not that I would have any experience in that
And then I'm going
topic.
to walk over to you.
But she's also the foul-mouthed ultra badass that you have been acquainted with at the beginning of my video. She was the one screaming. And then there's Emil, who's the obligatory kid party member because, remember, this is a JRPG. But unlike most other JRPGs, Emil doesn't actually suck. He's actually pretty cool, and I like him a lot. He's a good guy. Alright, so Nier's pretty by the numbers at first. You pretty much just travel somewhere in search of a cure for the Black Scroll, fight a boss, there's still no cure, and you move on to the next place. And then you rinse and repeat. But the end of the first half and the entire second half of the game are the good points. It sucks that you have to slog through the first half, most of the first half. There are good points to it that I will get to in a minute. The game knows its strength, though, because once you start a New Game Plus, which you need to get the full story, you start at the beginning of the second half, where Nier is sporting a brand new, unexplained mask/eye patch thing, and has gone full caveman and stopped caring about anything that's not related to his mission, and instead chooses to bludgeon everything to death if they look at him the wrong way, which is a character trait that I actually kind of find endearing. So the first half of the game isn't really as bad as I've been saying it is, mainly because of the dungeons that you go to, which aren't repeated in the second half. You get the same locales, but it's, you know, it's a different dungeon. So first off, you have Emil's Manor, which is one of my favorites. It's a throwback to old school survival horror games. The whole thing is just the slate gray because story reasons, and it's got these fixed camera angles, just like Resident Evil or Silent Hill, and it's got the same janky controls to match, which I dug. And there's also like a really simple key puzzle element to it, which barely worth mentioning because it is simple, but it's fun. Then there's the Sand Temple, which the whole thing is based on a set of puzzle rooms. And the point of the puzzle rooms is that they take away a different ability of Nier. So in one room you might not be able to use magic. If you use magic, you get teleported to the beginning of the challenge. And some of them have multiple restrictions. You can't run, you can't attack, and it's pretty cool because it makes you think. And then there's the Forest of Myth, which doesn't even really have a level so much, since it's just a text adventure. Like the screen goes black and text takes over the world. And it's actually one of the few points of comic relief, since Nier and Vice know that they're trapped in a world of text, and it just pisses them off. So they're constantly just being angry and pissed at everything that's going on because they don't get it, and it's actually pretty good. And then there's the Junkie, which sucks. I cannot tell you how much I hate the Junkie. It's the purgatory of level design, and it's the worst. If I never had to play the Junk Heap again, it would be too soon. The Junk Heap is the worst. The absolute goddamn worst thing. If I had to recommend a reason not to play Nier, it would be the Junk Heap. But thankfully the other aspects of the game overshadow the shittiness that is the Junk Heap. Alright, so now I'm going to touch on the cooler aspects of the combat system, which is primarily just the magic. Because the combat is simple. It's standard light and heavy attack. There's a dodge move that you can combine with a light attack that does a cool sweeping motion that fucks everything up, but it's bland. The cool point is the magic. You've got different spells ranging from these gigantic blood fists, blood spears, there's a shadow of Nier that fucks everything up, blood spikes that impale shades from below, and in case you didn't pick up on the theme, your magic is recharged by absorbing the blood of the shades that you kill. So, blood is a pretty consistent deal. Now, most of the spells that you get are pretty useless. There's like a wall that you'll never use. There's a bullet shooting spell that you'll never use beyond the point that you have to. But the point is that there are enough good spells to overshadow the shitty ones, and that's the combat system. And now for the bosses, which are one of my favorite elements of the game, because they're just fantastic. There's all kinds of monsters that you'll be fighting. There's 2 to 3 story-tall monsters, like a stupidly quick magic skeleton that you'll have a bitch of a time with, and a floating death orb named Windy. That is probably my favorite boss, because a floating death orb named Windy. But they've all got their own weaknesses and strengths, and the first time you fight them, they're actually challenging, at least until you get to New Game Plus and beyond, because enemy levels don't scale. So you'll have an easier and easier time to the point of almost boredom. The good point is that there's achievements and or trophies, depending on your platform of choice, that reward you for beating these bosses within pretty restrictive time limits. So it seems like the designers of the game intended that to happen instead of just being lazy, or they could have just added them in afterwards because they were lazy. It doesn't matter. I like the bosses. The bosses are fun. You'll enjoy the bosses. Play the game. The bosses are fun. Alright, so there's also a really cool genre-bending element to Nier, where some of the points of the game will take on characteristics, especially the bosses, of like bullet hell shooters. So these bosses are shooting out all of these fucking red orbs that will damage you if you hit them. I mean, if you block them, they don't do anything except knock you back a little bit, but then you won't be able to hit the boss. So you have to dodge and weave in between all of these red bullet hell type things in order to hit the boss. I mean, there's an entire level underneath Emil's Manor in the second half of the game that has a 3/4 isometric viewpoint that makes the whole thing resemble old school RPGs with an action element than it does like a modern day action RPG. Alright, now for the points of Nier that I just give top fucking marks for, because they're great. The first of which is the story. And the story, at least as I've said before in the first half, is pretty by the numbers. It's the second half that you really want to pay attention to, because in between the first and second half, there's a time skip.
You look like shit.
Several years have passed, and it's fun to see how everything has gone from, you know, your typical everything is ending, the world is ending kind of thing, to holy shit, this place is fucked, the entire world is coming to an end, and everything sucks. And it's great. Beating the game once only gives you half the story, as I've touched on briefly before. New Game Plus is something you have to do. It gives you Kaine's story, and she's a major player. You gotta know what happens with her. And I'm not going to spoil the rest, because it's awesome. But there's 4 endings to the game. I mean, you'll get the first on the first playthrough. It's depressing but hopeful, but it's not the true ending. The second one is much more bleak and fitting with Nier. And the third and fourth are a pain in the dick to get, because it requires you to do almost every side quest and obtain every weapon in the game. So, unless you're a completionist, I recommend you just watch them on YouTube, because it's the easiest way to do it, and the side quests are boring fetch quests. And now for the single part of Nier that I can recommend above all others, the soundtrack. Because the soundtrack is so damn good, if I had to sum it up in a single word, that word would be fucking awesome. It's easily one of the best I've ever heard in any medium. Every piece of it fits perfectly in the place it was put, be that a boss fight or just the starting town. But seriously, don't take my word for it. Like, I put a link in the video description, so you should check it out for yourself. Really. Go listen. I don't care if you watch the rest of this review or not, because the soundtrack is so good that if it doesn't make you want to play Nier immediately, Nothing I say after this will get you to go do it. It also helps that this is, pretty close to the end of the review, so if you stop watching now, it doesn't really matter to me. Alright people, there it is. Nier. A game you should go out and buy and play immediately. Like, you can seriously find it for $15. Like 10-ish, $15. It's cheap, it's worth your time, and it's fantastic.